at times. Much of that's out of the way for Sunday. All in all, a brighter day with less of a brisk wind. It's also going to be increasingly warm in the south during the start of next week, temperatures reaching the...
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Coming up tonight, Lucy Letby. That is a name that will be etched on all of our minds for years and years to come. Why? Because she has today been unveiled as the UK's most prolific child serial killer in modern times. 7 babies murdered, multiple others she attempted to murder too. This raises so many questions, not least what on earth was going on in that hospital. How on earth was all of this allowed to happen? Some people now saying this is why we need things like the death penalty. Is it? You tell me. And in other news today, I'm asking, can Britain now afford to give tax cuts? And if so, to whom? You tell me. And the creator of Father Ted, of course, been cancelled from one of the performances that he was due to give in Edinburgh. Why? Oh, brace yourself, everyone, because he believes a man is a man and a woman is a woman. Freedom of speech, is it real in this country or is it indeed under threat? And the Lionesses, go on girls, playing, of course, at the weekend. But early in the morning, some people saying, you know what, the pubs should just open up and start serving booze as early as 10 o'clock. But that is currently against the law. Some people saying, who cares? What do you make to that? We've got it all to come and more, but before we do so, let's bring ourselves up to speed with the latest headlines from Tatiana Sanchez.
Michelle, thank you. The latest from the GB newsroom. Former nurse Lucy Letby has been found guilty of the murder of 7 babies. She was also convicted of the attempted murder of 6 others between June 2015 and June 2016 at the Countess of Chester Hospital's neonatal ward. The 33-year-old will be sentenced on Monday. The government has ordered an independent inquiry into the case. Crown Prosecutor Pascal Jones described Letby's attacks as a complete betrayal of the trust placed in her.
Little did those working alongside her know that there was a murderer in their midst. She did her utmost to conceal her crimes by varying the ways in which she repeatedly harmed babies in her care. She sought to deceive her colleagues and pass off the harm she caused as nothing more than a worsening of each baby's existing vulnerability.
Dr. Nigel Scorn, Medical Director at the Countess of Chester Hospital, ensured his commitment to lessons being learned.
This case has had a profound impact on our patients and our local community and also our staff, who come to work every day determined to provide safe and high-quality care for all of our patients. Our staff are devastated by what has happened, and we are committed to ensuring that lessons continue to be learned.
Former Home Secretary Priti Patel says justice must be served in line with strict government laws when it comes to such horrific crimes.
This is a deeply, deeply horrible, appalling, abhorrent and traumatic case for those families that have lost their babies. It is a horrible case. The one thing I would add, though, is that the government has in recent years changed our laws for individuals that are effectively, deemed to have been involved in murdering children and harming children. And it's important that we see those laws put into practice by the courts when it comes to sentencing. So we can't prejudge anything right now. My sympathies are so much with those families. I mean, there are no words, really.
Some breaking news to bring you. Police investigating the murder of a 10-year-old in Woking say they're looking for her father. Sarah Sharif's body was found at her home last Thursday after police received a call from her dad, believed to be in Pakistan, just before 3 o'clock in the morning. Detectives say they're now seeking Irfan Sharif along with the child's stepmother and uncle. It's believed they've travelled to Islamabad the day before her death was discovered. A businessman has been found guilty of orchestrating a bomb plot against lawyers in a row over £1.4 million. Jonathan Nuttall was convicted of conspiring with his driver and an ex-Marine to plant 2 devices in London's legal district. The 4-month trial heard that Nuttall had been pursued by the National Crime Agency over the seizure of assets. An Old Bailey jury deliberated for 25 hours to convict all 3 men. Police in Northern Ireland have arrested a man in connection with the PSNI data breach. A 50-year-old man has been detained in County Londonderry under the Terrorism Act and is being questioned. Another man was arrested yesterday on suspicion of collecting information likely to be useful to terrorists. Last week, the details of 10,000 police officers and staff were published online by mistake, followed by a second breach relating to stolen documents and a laptop. Meanwhile, police have also revealed they're investigating the loss of an officer's laptop and notebook which fell from a moving vehicle yesterday. PSNI says the laptop was deactivated and had been recovered, but sections of the notebook are still missing. The contents of the book are unclear. GB News can reveal more than 25,000 migrants have crossed the Channel since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. The figure was reached just after midday today after the Border Force vessel Ranger arrived at Dover Harbour with 57 people on board. And despite poor weather conditions in the Channel today, a second migrant boat has made it to UK waters. It means more than 110 migrants have arrived in Kent today. Train drivers will strike on the 1st of September and overtime will be banned the day after in a long-running dispute over pay. The strike will force train companies across England to cancel all services, while the ban on overtime will seriously disrupt the network. It will be the 12th one-day strike by ASLEF members since the dispute started over a year ago. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by simply saying play GB News. Now it's back to Michelle.
Thanks, Tatiana. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, the Conservative life peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan, and the former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. Good evening, gentlemen. You know the drill, don't you, on Dewbs & Co? It is not just about us three. It's very much about you guys at home as well. One of my viewers got in touch with me the other day and said, Michelle, if we don't know the drill by now, when will we ever know it? You never know. That's why I keep hammering it home. Your views are very important to me. GBviews at gbnews.com is how you get hold of me, or you can tweet me at GB News. Now, of course, the main story in town today, the absolutely horrific case, Lucy Letby, who has been found guilty of murdering 7 babies on a neonatal unit in the UK. I mean, words fail you when it comes to something as evil and as horrific as this. So I shall start by going live to Sophie Reaper, who is in Manchester for us and has all the very latest information. Sophie, good evening. Please bring my viewers up to speed with the goings-on today.
Good evening to you, Michelle. Well, this trial, first of all, began back in October of last year. We are now 10 months on from that point. The jury was sent out back on the 10th of July, meaning they've had 22 days of deliberation, which some people may think is a very long time, but there were 22 counts on this indictment that Lucy Letby was facing, so I think that time was warranted. Today, we are now able to report exactly what the jury have found. They found her guilty of 7 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. We should also say they also found her not guilty on 2 counts of attempted murder, and also on 6 of the counts on the indictment they were unable to come to a verdict, and they were therefore left as hung, and the jury were then discharged by Justice Goss. Now, let's unpack all of that a little bit. Now, 7 murders means that Lucy Letby now becomes the most prolific serial killer of children in modern British times. Let's just take that in for a second. What a title to be taking, and that is how she will be remembered. Now, in terms of her reaction to this, the first few verdicts, because they did come in over several days, the first couple we heard the tears, we heard the sobbing from her as she reacted to those first couple of verdicts. After that, she became stony-faced and seemed to have no reaction whatsoever. Perhaps she was realising what her fate exactly was. But after that, we haven't really seen Lucy Letby since then. And when Justice Goss, the judge presiding over this case, questioned that, Benjamin Myers, KC of the defence, said that, in fact, Lucy Letby had made the decision that she would no longer be returning to the dock. She was, in fact, refusing to come not only to face the judge and the jury, but also refusing to face the families of those victims. So we now anticipate that that will indeed remain to be the case for the sentencing, which we expect to be on Monday at around 10 a.m, that we won't see Lucy Letby, that she refuses to come up to the dock and to face the crimes that she's committed, which make her the most prolific child serial killer in modern British history.
Sophie, thank you very much for that update. That's Sophie Reaper there, live from Manchester Crown Court. Now, you know, I think it's quite easy when a story like this comes out and you get the details. I've watched the media coverage, I've seen all of the press, and I've been watching what people have to say. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the drama of what's actually going on. And I just want to just take a second just to reflect on the enormity of this. This is obviously a UK hospital. This is a neonatal ward, a unit. Now, I just want to be absolutely clear. The children that we're talking about here, these are what I would call probably some of the most vulnerable people in our society. Many of these children were very, very premature babies, some of them weighing such tiny amounts. We're talking about weighing just over a pound, 1 pound. In some of these cases, these children, and I speak with experience, I was a NICU mum. My little boy was in a NICU unit for 6 weeks. And when you put your children into the care of this, it's very different. You don't have a happy birth and, go home with your child. Sometimes these births are very complicated. Your child is immediately taken away from you and put into these little boxes, I call them, the kind of incubators here, and you put your trust into these staff members more than I can even try and explain. You're sitting next to your children around the clock. It's a 24/7 thing. In the most serious of cases, the babies will have one-on-one care. You can't always be at the bedside of your little one. Sometimes you need to eat. You might need to go and just freshen up, sometimes go home and sleep. So you put your trust in a way that, I can't even... These tiny little things, and you trust the nurses, you trust them with everything possible that you have. And for them to do, or for this lady to have done something like this, it just chills me to the bone. And these families, not only the families that have got these verdicts today, but there will now be countless other families whose children perhaps have died, either at this hospital or one of those other hospitals, who are now thinking, well, was my child a victim of this? Was my child a victim of this? So many families today will be absolutely devastated. And my heart absolutely breaks for them. It really does. And there's lots of conversations, Daniel, about, the most prolific serial killer, child serial killer. And, I worry a little bit that this is going to become this big drama, and I give it 5 minutes before, TV stations are making, documentaries and programmes and all the rest of it. But, this is... words almost fail me, and that is very rare that happens to me, but words almost fail me because I know how tiny these children are. And I just think, how can you... I'm not excusing murder at the best of time, but to these tiny little vulnerable children, I can't process it.
Well, if you need any proof that there is such a thing as evil in the world, this is proof of it, isn't it? I mean, this is completely evil. And there's no way in which you can begin to understand what was going on inside the mind of the person who did this, knowing that, was there a thrill to it? Knowing that she'd been entrusted with this and fighting back the whole time. When she was suspected, she didn't say, well, that's my chance to get out now, I'll stop doing this. No, she fought back with a grievance complaint so that she could get back on the ward, which didn't actually happen because she was arrested in time. And so on. All of that seems to have come out now. And so she was absolutely determined that she was going to carry on doing this. And this was her life's work. And she'd carry on doing it until she stopped. There's no other way of thinking about that except as really objectively evil.
Yeah, and James, the thing that gets me, I've spent 6 weeks on the NICU ward with my little one, and it's like one of the most intense experiences you will ever have as a parent. The beeps are constantly there. You're constantly measuring the stats, the vitals on these screens. You go to sleep, if you manage to sleep, hearing all of these beeps and the alarms. They're such intense units. And you almost become, not a family, I don't want to exaggerate, it's not family, but you almost become this connection that you share with the staff members that look after your little ones when you go home at night. You can contact these units 24/7. How can you betray? There's no answers to this, but it's just, I have so many questions in my head towards this lady. How can you betray your trust like that? Words fail me.
Yeah, it's completely horrible and unexplainable. But, the one sort of positive thing in it, perhaps, is that it was the doctors also in the unit who were the ones that worked out that there were babies that were dying that shouldn't die, and then they worked out that it was her that was the one that was most likely doing it because she was on duty all of those times. So there was this, catastrophic failure with this, seemingly extremely evil person who then was protected, it seems, for a while by the managers in her hospital, while the doctors, the ones on the ward, who had a pretty fair idea and turned out to be entirely right that that she was responsible for this, and they kept on, they kept on fighting. They've saved more lives by continuing to fight, by taking the disciplinary, by fighting their own management on it.
Yeah, and actually, when you read into all of the details of this, some of these consultants, they were raising concerns. And then there were suggestions that they perhaps have to go to mediation, some of the doctors with Lucy Letby. There was an email apology sent to Lucy Letby for some of the things that had been said about her. It just all beggars belief. I mean, I'm absolutely disgusted by the fact that in this country, a criminal in this way can just decide that I'm not going to go into the court and hear my sentencing, hear the verdicts, whatever it is. I think it's fundamentally wrong that you can just choose to sit in your cell. I think it's the final insult to the families of the victims. Do you think people should be compelled, whether in law or otherwise, to be in court for these kind of moments?
Yeah, I think they should. I think people shouldn't have a choice about it. Justice, there's an old saying that justice needs to be seen to be done. And the sentencing is part of it. And I do think that this idea that serious criminals should be allowed to say, well, I'll just opt out from that and I'll stay home, watch the telly or something, is completely unacceptable. And I think the public and justice at large require that they be brought to the court. Now, I understand that will create management issues if they're going to be difficult and they have to be dragged there and whatever. But they shouldn't have a choice. They should be there to hear the sentence and to be taken down. And we should be able to see that. We and the families and the
What, we? So you think it should be a public kind of...
Well, increasingly, sentencing is being broadcast.
Yeah, but that's you only really see the judge, though. You don't really see the convicted.
Okay, but we want to know when we do see the judge that he's talking to somebody and not to empty air.
True. What do you make of that?
But there's also the families in the court and the victims in the court and the other people who have sat through the trial. They would be there and they would see the sentence being delivered. And I think it should be mandatory.
Do you think it should be mandatory to face your kind of outcomes?
Yeah, there's maybe a case that if you don't, it's contempt of court. But I think practically, if someone doesn't want to go and they're dragged there and they're being disruptive, they're going to be removed from the court for being disruptive. So, I mean, ultimately, if somebody is not going to behave properly, you can't make them behave properly. We want...
Well, I would strap them to I don't know what they call them. I'd strap them to something, and if you can't keep your trap shut and be respectful, I would actually put a gag around you and I would make you, whether I've got to have you upright on a board or something, I would have you in that dock. I would make you face the people that you have taken their loved ones from, and I would literally put a gag in it if you couldn't keep your trap shut.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether that's, that's what victims want or not, and I think it should probably be guided by, guided by that. I think that the more significant thing to look at is how we would stop, cases like this happening again. What are the safeguards that can be put in place? How can we listen more to the doctors and the professionals and less to the managers and the executives?
Yeah, and I think this hospital, it had something like, 2 or 3 deaths in the neonatal unit on average a year. So, of course, here we're talking about 7 murders and multiple other attempted murders. I think there's been 1 since Lucy Letby was taken away from that hospital. So that gives you some of the context. We've got the sentencing on Monday. Of course, we're just saying Lucy Letby will not be present, which I think is quite frankly disgusting. I don't know who you think you are. I will be debating that, the sentence that she receives with Peter Hitchens and the former barrister Alex Dean as well on Monday. I'm fascinated to hear that conversation because personally, if you ask me, I think the death penalty is the way we should be going towards people like this. I suspect that some of you at home might have a different view to me. But you know what? Pure evil, Lucy Letby. And my thoughts, my heart is with all of the families that know they've been affected, but also the families that are going to bed tonight wondering whether or not They have been affected with the deaths of their children too. There are no words. It's just utter, utter evil. I'm going to take a break, and when I come back, we'll be moving on to different things.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside with the Tory life peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan, and the former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. Lots of you guys getting in touch about that last story, the horrific situation with Lucy Letby. Discuss that name. Will turn my stomach for years and years to come. Talking about whether or not she should be forced, and people like her should be forced into court to hear the outcome, the verdicts, the sentencing, whatever. Mal says, if Lucy Letby and people like her refuse to face her fate in court, her sentence should be doubled without conditions. Many people saying that murderers and people like that accused, like Lucy Letby, should be forced into the dock. Would you like to be on the other side, though, if that was your loved one, or you've got someone, I don't know, disrupting and being abusive or whatever, telling you that they don't care or whatever it is? Would that cause you more upset than not? Many as well pointing out, what about the consequences to the senior bosses at these hospitals, and what will happen to them? Well, based on some of the details that I've been reading, I think a few people will be getting in trouble because of failings there, and rightly so, if you ask me. Lots of people talking about the death penalty. Ian says, I can't think of a better argument for the death penalty than a serial baby murderer. One of my viewers as well, I won't give your name out, but you've just been in touch with me to tell me Dewberry, that your granddaughter was actually part of the jury, and you're just highlighting the process that those guys have been through and the emotional toll that is taken on the jury. Some of the stuff that they have had to hear is not to be desired, I can assure you. So respect to that viewer's granddaughter and everybody else for that horrible situation, no doubt, that they have been forced to go through for many months now. Right, let's move on. Britain, can we afford tax cuts? We talk about the economy all the time. Well, there's been analysis in the Express now. Apparently, they reckon the government coffers will have an extra £40 billion this year. This is all to do with things like the tax thresholds having not changed, people getting pay rises, going into the higher bands and all the rest of it. Lord Moylan, I shall start with you. Do you think it's time for tax cuts now in the autumn budget?
Well, the first thing I'd say is the best thing that the government can do to help ordinary people is to get inflation right down, because inflation is completely corrosive. And tax cuts are a second best to help them, but inflation needs to be beaten, and it's not coming down fast enough. As far as tax cuts are concerned...
But how are the government doing inflation? I know Jeremy Hunt took some credit the other day when it came down a little bit.
It's the Bank of England's job.
Yeah, exactly.
And they've got a mandate from the government, and they should be standing over them and making them do it, because inflation is caused by monetary policy and is cured by monetary policy, and the Bank of England's in charge of it.
So
let it grow, and they need to bring it down.
So what are you saying then? You've got to the government's got to stand over them.
Yeah, the government has a mandate for them.
Rate rises?
The government says you've got 2%. Rate rises or other monetary measures need to be taken, in my view, harder in order to bring inflation down. It's not coming down fast enough or far enough. But on the question of tax cuts, I just want to say something here. The government, we're so borrowed in this country. The government's so borrowed following the COVID, splurge of expenditure. We're so borrowed that the government is absolutely terrified of what the bond markets will do to them if they behave in a way that is seen to be irresponsible. That's what happened to Liz Truss. That's what they're absolutely terrified of. And their protection against that is to do whatever the Office for Budget Responsibility says they can do, and whatever their model, their wonky model, shows. So effectively, whether we have tax cuts or not is decided by the new rulers of this country, which is the Office for Budget Responsibility. They'll make the decision, they'll run their model, and they'll tell Jeremy Hunt what he can do. And whether he has to use that $40 billion to pay down debt or to give people tax cuts, all those decisions will be made effectively by the OBR.
I want to respond to you, but before I do, let me just bring in James for his thoughts.
So, of course, we can give tax cuts to some people. There's a question of priorities. I mean, we could reduce the tax burden and also increase services for lower middle earners, and have, through tax simplification and taxing wealth, we could increase taxes at the top. That would be a sensible thing. You could do that in an extremely responsible, transparent manner, which wouldn't spook the bond markets. But I just want to respond to one thing that Daniel was saying, because I found it quite interesting that you thought that the Bank of England being insulated from the government's decision-making and setting the direction on interest rates, which in my view what they're doing is wrong, is apparently a good thing, whereas the Office of Budget Responsibility doing it and setting the fiscal envelope is a bad thing. I mean, I think both of these things are a bad thing.
I agree with you, actually. I don't think the Bank of England should be independent. I wasn't saying it was a good thing. I was just saying they were incompetent.
Right.
And they've caused the problem and they haven't cured it. But ideally, these decisions should be taken by democratically accountable politicians on both issues, and not being run by these two organisations on either side, monetary and fiscal, which have no accountability to anybody.
Let me ask you this on this COVID debt, because one of the situations we're in economically is to do with how much debt we accumulated, as you say, during COVID. One of the things I've never understood, and I'm sure you will be able to simply answer it for me, is we've got these huge debts now. Why didn't we? I remember Rishi Sunak proudly standing wherever it was saying, we're going to pay down our COVID debt, we're not going to pass it on to our grandkids or whatever it was. And I looked at the screen saying, well, why not? Why are we so desperate to pay down this debt? Why didn't we, when interest rates were really low at the time, why didn't we package these up like, I don't know, like a war debt, kick them out into the long term, chip away at them slowly? Why have we sucked it up and given ourselves this, what I would say, avoidable economic harm?
I have absolutely no answer to that, because what you are describing, what you are saying, is exactly what I was saying at the time, that a lot of this debt should be taken and packaged up as perpetual bonds, like the war bonds that went on forever, should be packaged up at the low interest rates that were available at the time and insulated in some way from our normal borrowing requirements because they were clearly one-off and very, very special. And yet somehow that wasn't done, and the very long-term borrowing was not carried out when that is what we should have been doing. Of course, one of the problems was we'd run out of capacity to borrow from the markets in those days. A lot of that borrowing was borrowed from the Bank of England, which means they just printed money. They didn't, because they don't have any money either. So they just print more banknotes, if you like, in order for the government to borrow it. That's what's led to the inflation. The whole lockdown has turned out to be a catastrophe.
I mean, economic orthodoxy has a huge amount to blame because we had austerity for a decade, which was completely unnecessary. We didn't invest in the economy when we had incredibly low, historically low, probably one-off low interest rates, when we could have borrowed for the long-term investment that we need, which would boost productivity, improve our public services, improve our industry, and so on and so forth. But we didn't do that because we had George Osborne and most of the media and most of the political class cheering on the idea that it was a mistake to do that. And then the follow-on logic is the same as you've just been discussing. No business would have managed themselves in this way, but we have had this. And the reason why we have had it is to reduce the claims that ordinary people can have on public spending to benefit tax cuts at the very top, which is what we've seen now for 13, 14 years.
He says austerity was basically not needed. Many people will be shouting at the screen saying it absolutely was needed because they will say the state of the economy post-Labour. Where are you on it?
Well, taxes at the top have gone up, not down.
No, I'm on about austerity. Was austerity needed?
Gordon Brown left office, since Alistair Darling was Chancellor of the Exchequer. But the great thing about the austerity under George Osborne is that it's a great left-wing myth because it never happened. There was no year in which government expenditure fell when George Osborne was Chancellor. It carried on rising every year. What there was a reallocation of expenditure. So some things were protected, if you remember. The NHS was protected. I think defence was protected. Pensions were protected. Those were protected. And in order to keep a sensible lid on the overall quantum, other things like local authority expenditure and so on were squeezed quite hard. But the total amount of expenditure went up every year. It's a complete myth. It was a choice of how you spend it.
Well, there you go. If you're not, we're talking about how you're spending your money. If you're sitting in this country, I'll tell you how you're not spending it, and that is by going on holiday. So if you're not going to get the sun on holiday, let's have a look whether or not you'll be getting it at home, the weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Overnight, storm Betty will bring lashings of wind and rain to the UK. In some places, gales, as well as in other places, thunderstorms. Betty was named by Met Erin, the Irish Met Service, because the strongest winds will be affecting Southern Ireland overnight, but also western parts of England, southwest Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales will see gales and in some places 60 or even 70 mile/hour wind gusts. The worst of the winds move through overnight, but there's also the risk of thunderstorms developing across the east of England and persistent rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland. So all in all, a lively night of weather and a warm night as well, staying fairly muggy. We start off Saturday with the wet and windy weather moving through Irish Sea coasts, Northern Ireland as well as Scotland. The most persistent rain arrives into the north of Scotland, but we'll continue to see further spells of wet weather for the rest of Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England. Across the rest of England and Wales, it brightens up. There'll be some showers, but also some decent sunshine. And in the southeast, 26 Celsius, it's going to stay relatively humid. Sunday, all in all, is a brighter day, particularly for northern areas. Again, a mix of sunny spells and showers. Still a brisk breeze from the southwest, but that's going to be bringing once more some higher temperatures at times. So mid-20s possible in the southeast, turning even warmer in the south through next week, staying changeable in the north.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The tax conversation got a lot of you guys talking. Adrian says, why don't we just cut VAT on things like all your basics, your bread, your egg, your milk, your whatever, the basic food. What are you chuntering?
Sorry, you don't have VAT on bread, eggs and milk.
There you go. Well, that told you, Adrian. Guy says, Michelle, you're talking about the COVID debt as though it was a bad thing. Workers' jobs were saved. And yes, of course, it incurred debts. He says, now the people are just criticising the government, the economy, and now demanding tax cuts. Those people are so selfish and so stupid, says Guy. Not debating the debt, by the way. We're just talking about why did we have to have this rush to pay it off so quickly? Why not ease the pain? I don't know. You give me your thoughts, GB Views at gbnews.com. Free speech coming up next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry till 7 o'clock. Daniel Moylan and James Schneider remain alongside me. Lots of people saying, well, why don't we just raise the personal tax threshold in this country if you want to tinker with tax thresholds, etc. That way everyone benefits equally. Many of my viewers are saying. I'll leave you to ponder that. Now, the creator of Father Ted, he has had his Edinburgh Fringe comedy show cancelled. You might be familiar with this story. It was cancelled by Leaf Arches. It then got a second venue. They cancelled it as well. And the venue went out. It basically took place on a little stage outside of Holyrood. Many people, I'll start with you, Daniel, many people are saying that this is all about the fact that free speech, we say we've got free speech in this country, but actually when you start questioning various things, or if you believe, for example, a man is a man and a woman is a woman, then all of a sudden people get edgy, tetchy, and then cancellation kicks in again. So do we have freedom of speech?
No, we don't have freedom of speech in this country. And those with power and those with control of assets, like theatres, and those with influence in universities, have prohibited a whole load of things that we're not allowed to say anymore. And some of those things are bad things, perhaps things you shouldn't say. Others are for most people, fairly straightforward that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. They don't regard that as being a bad thing to say. But you can now be harassed and you can be arrested, you can be taken away for saying things like that and for causing offence. And a lot of this has now been put into law, and it's called hate speech and so on. And so somebody like Graham Linehan finds himself on the receiving end of censorship for saying something that the vast majority of people believe. It is political correctness gone totally mad.
Do you agree with that?
I sort of agree with the first bit and really don't agree with the second bit. So I do think that our political and media discourse prevents lots of things from being said very much because either they're not in the interests of the politicians or their donors, or they're not in the interests of the media companies or their owners. So you've got lots of very popular things that can't get spoken about very much in politics or the media, like public ownership of water and energy, higher taxes for the rich, boosting the minimum wage. These things
it's talked about all the time.
No, it really doesn't.
I've lost count of the amount of times I've had nationalisation debates on the show, for example. I've seen them in
only when I'm on, but it's got public ownership has got of utilities is supported by between 2/3 and 3/4 of the population. You don't hear about that very much. We don't discuss very much how we could boost wages. All of these things. So yes, powerful interests in society do set what can be spoken about in the public sphere, and we should be conscious of that, and that's an issue. On this specific thing, I don't think that Graham Linehan has lost his ability to speak, because his show has got way more attention being not shown at whatever comedy store that they didn't want to have him on, than if he had on there, and he would probably get his own show on this channel, and he hasn't been silenced in that way. And the things that he's saying,
but he was silent. Whether or not he's now got a load of interest and eyeballs as an aftermath or as a side effect, that's different. He was absolutely cancelled. When you saw the original statement that the event company put out and then hastily deleted when they realised the backlash and changed it for something else, they were categorically saying that this person's views do not align with their values, and that is why they had cancelled this person. So he categorically was cancelled.
I mean, but he hasn't lost his voice. He hasn't lost his ability to speak. But we see these sorts of things all over the place. There are protests at drag shows. There was a film about Jeremy Corbyn's leadership that got banned in lots of places.
You're ignoring the fact this person was absolutely cancelled because of his opinions. What you're doing is you're saying because he's then had exposure as a result of that, then it's all fine. It's not fine. He shouldn't have been cancelled by that venue. Surely you agree with that?
I'm not saying that it's fine. I do think that venues are allowed to have who they, want on, and if they don't want him to...
Really? So where would you draw the line then? So if a venue said, for example, I'm not going to have any black people in, would you sit there and say, well, you're a private venue, you can choose who you want in?
No, because that's a breach of the law.
But people saying that biological sex is real...
Hold on,
those views are also protected.
They
are.
Your racial identity is protected under the Equalities Act. Your views about gender and sex aren't protected under the Equalities Act.
Well,
so one of them is a breach of the law, and the other one
sex
isn't.
Is one of 7 categories.
So I said your views. I said your views on sex and gender.
Well, there's been multiple cases.
As in, if a theatre had said that trans people can't appear in it, or gay people can't appear in it, or men can't appear in it, or so on and so forth, or black people, that is a breach of the Equalities Act. If your views are something, that isn't a breach of the law. So it's not the same thing. It's not an equivalent
thing. There's been multiple cases, though, when people have been, they've lost their jobs because of what are so-called gender-critical views or whatever the daft label is applied to them. And actually, those people, now when they've taken it to tribunals or courts or whatever, they've won their cases and they've been discriminated against.
I think there are plenty of cases when employers act against their staff for things that aren't in the purview of their work, and as long as that isn't causing problems within the rest of their colleagues or so on and so forth, then if they're reinstated, that's all well and good. My point overall is that, yes, we have a restricted political debate, but the political debate is not being restricted on the particular issue that his show was not shown at its original scheduled venue. That issue, the issue of views on sex and gender, are well discussed in the political debate. They've had many more minutes of airtime, for example, on this programme, than questions of public ownership, boosting pay, taxing the rich, things which have huge supermajority support and are much more relevant to many more people's lives than what is quite a marginal issue.
Well, I don't know. For me as a mum, I can tell you right now, this whole gender ideology and trans ideology in schools that I think is going to reach, or I fear would reach my child and affect his life and future, that for me is way more of interest than who owns my water supply. But maybe that's just me. You might have a different view, but I'll tell you something that perhaps we'll all agree on. We'll end on a positive high. The Lionesses this weekend. Whatever you think of women's football, it's fantastic that we've got to this stage of a World Cup, isn't it? We'll discuss that in a couple of seconds.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside me the Tory life peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan, and the former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. Linda, I said, can you ask James to smile, please? Because I don't think he ever does when he's on air with you, and I bet he's got a smile to die for. There you go, Linda. I'll let you be the judge of whether or not that is a smile to die for. Dewberry Tavern is open, so cheers, everybody, and happy Friday to you. Which leads me very nicely to my final topic, which can only be, can't it? I was going to get Daniel Moylan to get hold of this. Go on, Daniel, get hold of it.
There we are.
Will you this weekend? Of course. What am I doing? What am I talking about? The Lionesses. So I'm wondering, will you be in the pub on Sunday morning giving it a bit of England, England, England? Will you, Daniel?
I'll be watching it. I think I'll watch it from home
Will you be draped
rather
in
than the pub, but I don't. I may dress up. If you let me have one of these, I may actually wear this on Sunday on the sofa, but it will be in private. I will not be sharing it with anybody else.
Will you not?
I won't even photograph it. So
Just a private.
it's just going to be a very private dressing up experience as I cheer them on to victory, which I know is certain.
Go on, the Lionesses. Are you going to be watching it?
Yeah, and hopefully in the pub.
In the pub?
Yes.
As well. Give me the thing. Let me just go on. Just
James,
suck it up, James. Go on. See, look, he's getting into the swing of it. Who was that? Linda. Linda, you see, you were saying you think he never smiles. He smiles. He's got a great England flag. He's getting all patriotic. GB News is rubbing off on him. I like it. I like it. Come on. Give you a couple of days, you'll be voting Tory. You'll be wondering what's going on.
I think that's extraordinarily unlikely.
Well, you never say
the most anti-patriotic party in the country. They don't look after the interests of ordinary people.
Look at him. Don't sabotage my good feel-good end to the show. I do have a confession to make. I will not be watching the game live on Sunday. I must confess, my little boy has got a birthday party, which I have to take him to, so I'll have to watch it on catch-up.
Why do you think there'll be any other children at the birthday party? They'll all have cancelled.
There'll be a screen in the corner.
I don't know if there will be, you know, but in all seriousness...
They're anti-football?
I think, no, they're not anti-football, but I think this is really, you know, there's a lot of doom and gloom in society at the moment. There's a lot of political difference and disconnection. There's a lot of division and all the rest of it. But something like this, it is something that unites everybody. Even if you're not a massive football fan, it doesn't really matter because surely England reaching finals of anything, quite frankly, is brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. It's unambiguously good and people are really getting behind it. I think that the viewing figures for the semi-final was something like 7.5 million people. It's going to be much more for the final. And it's great to win, and we've got a really great team.
You think we will win?
I think I think we're favourites.
What's your prediction, score prediction? I'm going to write this down so I can remember. Score prediction.
3-1 England.
3-1 England.
I'm 2-0.
2-0.
Yeah. Do you remember, this political... Harold Wilson always thought he won the 1966 general election off the back of the World Cup, didn't he?
If...
This could be the save. This could be Sunak's... There could be a snap general election. We go to the polls in September on the back of the... What do you think?
I think that's very unlikely.
Puts Rishi back in control of a large majority.
I think he'll try to do a sort of failing viral TikTok video where he's on the phone to Mary Earp saying, you know, well done, that was really good. Good goalkeeping.
What, with the short trousers? No, he'll be tremendous. He did great TikTok videos.
One of my viewers, Keith, he sent a little picture in for us. Can we have a look at that? Oh, there you go. It's saying, meanwhile, in the House of Commons bar on Sunday morning, you've got Davey, you've got Starmer, you've got Sunak in a lumberjack shirt. I'm not sure I'd ever see that day. There's a lot of talk about whether or not pubs should be serving alcohol at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. Do you think they should?
Well, it's a difficulty, isn't it? Because they'd have to break, many of them would be breaking the conditions of their licence.
Do you think they should, though, on this one occasion?
A very serious consequence for the landlord. And why should we be pressing landlords to put their jobs and their livelihoods at risk because we want to get into the pub early?
Do you think they should serve booze a bit earlier on Sunday morning?
For a special occasion,
I think they should be allowed to, but the fact is it's all happened so quickly. Nobody seems to have thought we might do... Why did people not think about this? So the necessary time sort of hasn't been allowed to either amend the legislation or to amend the licences to allow the landlords to open up earlier than they normally would.
Maybe they were just being pessimistic and didn't think they'd reach...
I'm sure...
You could not remotely have been pessimistic about this because England went into this with, if not the favourite, I think they were the favourite, but very, very high hopes. And somebody really should have thought about it. I blame Michael Gove. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, absolutely. Department of Levelling Up Homes and Communities, he should have been out there extending licences, passing statutory instruments and doing all this back in July.
Oh, there's Gordon in Essex. He's saying, I do wish the Lionesses every success, and I am fully behind them, but come on, it's not proper football, Michelle. Oh, Gordon, I can hear people groaning, I can hear it. Ken says, I love watching ladies' football. My granddaughters play, and these women are an inspiration to them.
I love ladies.
Look, you know what?
I love ladies' football.
I say this, go on, Lionesses, you can bring it home and you can teach the men a thing or two. Good luck, and we'll see you on Monday.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Overnight, storm Betty will bring lashings of wind and rain to the UK. In some places, gales, as well as in other places, thunderstorms. Betty was named by Met Erin, the Irish Met Service, because the strongest winds will be affecting Southern Ireland overnight, but also western parts of England, southwest Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales will see gales and in some places 60 or even 70 mile/hour wind gusts. The worst of the winds move through overnight, but there's also the risk of thunderstorms developing across the east of England and persistent rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland. So all in all, a lively night of weather and a warm night as well, staying fairly muggy. We start off Saturday with the wet and windy weather moving through Irish Sea coasts, Northern Ireland as well as Scotland. The most persistent rain arrives into the north of Scotland, but we'll continue to see further spells of wet weather for the rest of Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England. Across the rest of England and Wales, it brightens up. There'll be some showers, but also some decent sunshine. And in the southeast, 26 Celsius, it's going to stay relatively humid. Sunday, all in all, is a brighter day, particularly for northern areas. Again, a mix of sunny spells and showers. Still a brisk breeze from the southwest, but that's going to be bringing once more some higher temperatures at times. So mid-20s possible in the southeast, turning even warmer in the south through next week, staying changeable in the north.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.